So please help me welcome Ken Wagner.
Thank you, Corey. And good afternoon. And thank you to James and the Muskogee Creek Nation for this beautiful venue, the great food, and the great partnership. So thank you, Chief Hill, and Chief Beaver. Well, first of all, I love the Sustainability Alliance. My involvement with them came, I wasn't the pioneer, that was Mike Teague, who was my predecessor at the state. And one of the first things he did after I took office was to introduce me to Corey. In fact, it was before I took office, actually, and said, you really need to get involved with this organization, what they do, both on the education side, as well as taking businesses and showing businesses how sustainability can not only affect their social license to operate, but can affect their bottom line. And so I was proud to support them from the Office of the Secretary, as well as the Department of Environmental Quality. And they continue to do great work today. So thank you for putting this together. So why are we here? I'm going to just set the stage a little bit, and then I'm going to introduce two of my esteemed panelists. The third came down with a virus this morning and could not make the drive from Oklahoma City. So Shelley will not be joining us, which is a shame because she is truly a national leader in the water space. So you're stuck with Second Chief Beaver, myself, and Jim Roth, who have all dealt with these issues on multiple planes, but don't have the depth of knowledge she did. So why are we here today? So, you know, three and a half years ago when I left the governor's staff and I left the secretary's office, the only data centers we were talking about were Bitcoin miners. It was not something that was on the national consciousness. It was not something that we talked about, other than the expansion of Google's data center in Cryo, which we, all know about, and a state agency, DRDA, actually powers. But it was not something that we foresaw. I mean, load growth for the investor-owned utilities has remained static for 2 decades or better. And today, if you go to a conference, whether it's an economic development conference, whether it's an energy conference, or whether it's an environmental conference, data, power, and the effects of that is all you will ever hear about. And so the timing is so good that we can talk about this together today. There's really 5 issues that drive the conversation. And that's power. Where are we going to get the power? How much is needed? And who's ultimately going to pay for that? The cost allocation, of course, who pays? What tax breaks, what exemptions are these entities getting to develop their site here in Oklahoma? Water. How much do they really need? How much is available? How is it going to strain? And what is it going to do to our rates? What's it going to do to our natural resources? What's it going to do to our environmental habitat? Local control and land use. We see the city of Oklahoma City entering a moratorium on new data centers. We see protests at every level at city council meetings, rivaling the town halls of congressional members. People, lines to get in, carrying signs, that sort of thing. And lastly, who benefits from this development and how do we manage that? So those are the areas we're going to talk about. We've got Chief Hill from the government side, and who's both regulated, deals with economic development, and has a citizenry that he has to answer to. And then we've got a former corporation commissioner and incredible, one of the foremost energy lawyers in Oklahoma and in the country, who's at the forefront of all these issues, and myself, who's touched on a lot of it. So, we've seen the evolution of thinking data centers were pretty cool to seeing these protests, and we have 3 levels of protests that I think that we have to be aware of. One is people that are genuinely trying to understand what's happening, what the landscape is today, how does this affect me? And then there's people that really aren't so opposed to the idea of data centers, but they don't want it in their backyard, the NIMBY, not in my backyard crowd. But we've evolved, and it's not just data centers, but we've evolved to a new group of protesters that we term banana. Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. It doesn't matter if it's data centers, it doesn't matter if it's a smelter plant. And you know, I say that jokingly, but we see it every day. And our job here today is not to convince you of anything. We're not here to advocate on any specific topic. We're not here to advocate on behalf of power companies or data centers or communities. Our job is to hopefully present issues in a way that you all can make better informed decisions on what your support, on what your advocacy, on what your votes might ultimately entail. And so that's why we're here today. And I couldn't be more thrilled to have such great panelists to join me. I'm going to start with, that wasn't an important microphone. I'm going to start with Second Chief Beaver. And he's got a very long bio, and I'm going to encourage you all to read that, but I'm going to hit some highlights. But first of all, he's a great guy. I got to know him back in probably 2017 when I was with US EPA, and I was fortunate enough to come do a tour at the Muskogee Creek Nation's headquarters in Muskogee. And as you might have, I brought the regional administrator from Region 6 down in Dallas along with me, and we got to spend a day with Del and his staff, James included, and find out about all the great projects. They were recipients of several grants from USDA, and they continue to spend those monies in a wonderful stewardship way. And I realized what great leaders they were, and I've watched his career through the legislative branch as second, and I can tell you, you talk about economic. Look at this facility we're in right now. The Muskogee Nation is an incredible partner here in Tulsa and throughout their reservation. So we're thrilled that he's here. He can give you a unique perspective from a government standpoint and dealing with citizens who are loud, citizens who care, and as those governance issues. Our second panelist is Jim Roth. And Jim, as I mentioned, is a former county commissioner. So he served 2 terms as Oklahoma County Commissioner before being appointed by Governor Brad Henry as a corporation commissioner that dealt with all of the issues that dealing with your electricity rates as well as your telecom. And if it's taxed or generates revenue for the state of Oklahoma, it likely goes through the Corporation Commission. So I used to joke that if you were a corporation commissioner, you couldn't catch a cold without it being an ethical violation. So if you want to give him anything, that's it. So, but from that time forward, he was appointed about 8 years ago, as the dean of the Oklahoma City Law School, and he helped grow that into a stronger, greater asset for the state of Oklahoma. Educating, I know I got to teach several years environmental law in under his leadership. And if you walked through the student union with him, it was like walking with the Pied Piper. Literally everybody coming up and talking. He knew every one of their names, and that's the type of person, leader he is. I used to argue with him, and I would tell people that he just called me an idiot, and somehow I feel better for myself for having done it. He's just got away with words, and so I think you'll enjoy his insights, and we're thrilled to do that. So if you guys want to come up, we'll get started. Thank you.
I hope I didn't call you an idiot, kid.
He's also told me that to my face too. Thank you guys. Thank you guys genuinely for being here. Second Chief Beaver, we'll just jump right into it, and we're hoping to go 30-ish minutes, and then save about 25 or so for questions, and you'll curate those through the text, right, Corey?
Yes.
And we will hopefully get to as many of those as we can. So, you represent and govern over all of your citizens, which is literally number in the tens of thousands, and they're spread out across the reservation as well as throughout the country. You have to deal with issues as they affect the economics of your tribe. You have to deal with the regulatory aspects, passing laws to create a good governance model for your government. And you also have to deal with a lot of loud people. I used to tell people that the worst job in America is being the president of the university, because everybody thinks they work for you,
Right.
and you work for them, I mean. And I know that's the case with that. First of all, with this recent boom, and I know of several projects, large projects within your reservation boundaries, and many of those have enjoyed support as well as protest. How has your views evolved on data centers, recognizing that you have to balance, and how do you balance economic development and prosperity, strain on your natural resources, as well as dealing with the sentiment of your citizenry, knowing that you all are, at the end of the day, elected officials?
Well, thanks again. That's a pretty, I don't want to say loaded question, but we could talk about that question probably for the rest of the time. But just from my perspective, and I guess my worldview is that my background is in environmental, if you didn't know. That's where I got my degree in. I spent 13, 14 years of my career in environmental work. And so that has shaped my worldview on things moving forward. And so whenever we talk about data centers, one, I had to figure out, what is a data center? What's it truly mean? They've been around for a long time, but now we're seeing these hyperscale data centers and those types of things. And so, and then when we talk about, economic development, of course, every tribe in the nation has casinos, or most of us have casinos, but we want to diversify. So that's a conversation that we always want to diversify our portfolio. We can't just rely on casinos, and so that's nothing new. And so obviously, when you talk about data centers, what I've seen and feel like is that, golly, it's come on so quickly. When AI came out, this whole issue has just boomed, and so it's hard to get my hands around it, because it's hard to know exactly what's true and what's not true. And so, I hope that today we can kind of peel back the onion and see what's true and not true. And I'm not here to change anybody's minds. I'm not. Sometimes you walk in this room and you already have your mind made up about data centers, and that's fine. But in my position, I don't have that luxury. I always have to look at both sides of the coin. And so on one side is that my environmental side. On the other side is that I know that social services cost a lot of money, cost lots of money to provide for our people. And so we do need to diversify. But I'm just very cautious about things like this, because from the time we got in office, there's always somebody coming in and saying, "Hey, I got the best deal for you," And so I'm always guarded whenever those things come up. But data centers, what is it? What's it cost? What's the drain on the resources going to be? Because and I'm not trying to be a hypocrite either, because by nature I'm not really like on board with data centers. But I got two phones, one in my pants pocket, one in my coat pocket. I have ChatGPT app on one. I got Claude AI on the other. So I'm not trying to be hypocritical about this, right? Because I can't say no to data centers but have two phones. I just can't do it, So there has to be a medium somewhere, and that's what we're trying to figure out: is what's the medium? What's the happy medium? Not just take out happy, because you're not going to make everybody happy. but what's just the median that we can live with, right? What are we willing to give up to get? And that's the biggest question mark that I have not really seen yet, because all I've seen so far is dollars, dollars, dollars. I can't eat dollars.
Well, that's right, and I will tell you, there are large promises. That's what people always come in and talk about. But I'm from northeastern Oklahoma as well. I'm from Tahlequah. Growing up, we played prior in every sport, and they had the worst facilities. Maybe still was worse, I don't know, but they had some of the worst, and today they have some of the best, if not the best. And so those are real things that you can see and touch where you've seen that, but promises are much more difficult to meet through, and hopefully we can answer some of those questions today. As I was thinking about the questions to ask Jim, and most of those relate to power, but I know of 12 large load interqueue connect requests at the Southwestern Power Pool today. That means that represents 12 large data center projects. At least that's my belief. Why Oklahoma and why now? Why are we seeing this large influx of data center interest in the middle of the country, and specifically here in Oklahoma?
Yeah. First of all, thank you. Good afternoon. Chief, thank you for the hospitality. Ken, always a pleasure to see you. First, for those of us that may not know, you referenced the Southwest Power Pool. That's actually a 14-state bathtub of electrons that includes all of Oklahoma, a smidgen of Louisiana, the eastern side of New Mexico, the Texas Panhandle, and then all the states north of us at the Canadian border. So think about that. That is actually our market for electricity. You and I often think it comes from that distribution line in our backyard, but we are all in this together essentially. And so when he's talking about our electricity market, there's a lot of interest in this region. So why this region, to his question? And certainly why Oklahoma? Let me start with a question. Who here thinks their utility bill is too low? Who here has turned on their heater and their air conditioning the same day in Oklahoma? Right. So I offer those two questions to make this point. My mother is almost 80, lives on a fixed income, and lives in Oklahoma City, and thinks her monthly utility bill is hate mail. She thinks it's always too high. Now, whether you're one of the 36 cooperative customers, whether you're one of the IOUs like Muskogee and PSO, or maybe one of the 40-plus municipalities, or even GREA, Oklahoma's public power source here in northeastern Oklahoma, I'm happy to share with you that depending on who they are, you are 20 to 38% cheaper on electricity than the national average. But it doesn't feel that way monthly. It doesn't feel that way, and you might even think, well, our cost of living is less, which is true. But the abundance of energy in Oklahoma has actually allowed us to push off the inflation drivers that have mostly really skyrocketed in other parts of America. Even though your bill is higher, my bill is higher than it was 20 years ago. We are overproducing natural gas and petroleum. We're fourth in the nation, respectively. Wind energy has been an incredible run for Oklahoma in the last 20 years, and we are now second in production, third in installed capacity. We have the potential to be sixth in solar. 3 years ago, we were 48th. We're now moving to 45th. So we are oversupplying ourselves and ultimately helping to oversupply that bathtub of electrons that I described to you, which makes us attractive. Which makes us attractive to people who have large electrical inputs in their industries, whether it's manufacturing, data, artificial intelligence, or cryptocurrency, as was mentioned earlier in Ken's intro. So it feels high to us, but it's attractive comparatively to others. And then secondly, to the point that Chief was making, I use GPS to get here. I uploaded a photo to the cloud earlier this morning. I texted while driving, I'm sorry to admit. And I have constantly been using my electronic resources that all are stored somewhere for my convenience and benefit. If I had an accident while texting and driving, 911 would have relied on a local data center for an instant identification of where it was and mapping for emergency services. So it is a part of all of our lives. And we currently feel like the run is happening at us and it's got some exposures to us because we actually are living proportionally a cheaper existence than other parts of the country. Although, as I mentioned, it doesn't feel that way often.
So So one follow-up on that is, as we think about a modern data center, specifically the large ones, what percentage of their costs is electricity? And is it the largest cost they deal with?
Yeah, so I'm here, and not on behalf of any particular client, I should have offered that disclosure to begin with. It is the number one input, as I've understood it, across data center operators.
Do you have any
From a
idea?
cost standpoint.
Do you have any idea what percentage of that is? I've heard numbers, but
I have heard numbers, but I'm afraid it might identify the secret sauce for some of them. So I would just say it's number one.
Okay. And is that better than 50%?
See, we are friends, and I've never called a meeting until now. That's an idiot question, right?
No, we'll leave that where it is. Okay, so tell me, and we'll go follow up that, and then we'll come back to you because I think you'll have comments on this particular question. As you have represented brand X, Y, or Z throughout the time, how is it that in these negotiations with cities and power providers that they have dealt with things that make them more community friendly? In other words, things that would make accepting a data center more attractive than some of the things that we hear.
Yeah, so it might be helpful to first talk about who we are talking about and what is a true data center. Does anybody here do online banking? Raise your hand if you do. Right. So does anybody use an Oklahoma-based bank to do it? Same here. They have their own data center. It's considered an enterprise data center because it's actually a part of their daily existence and their business. Even though you're on a consumer interfacing with it, its process mostly is for the benefit of their own business and existence. It's not a true standalone data center where we're dealing with clouds and all sorts of other intersections, like I think Kent's question is presuming. So that is a distinction that we need to recognize, that there are data centers, maybe not past some of these threshold amounts of energy that we're talking about, the largest ones, but there are data centers in your community now doing those functions that you and I are actually utilizing throughout our daily lives. But even in that larger category, I think we need to be mindful of the distinction between the hyperscaler that is a brand name you would recognize that is ultimately going to operate that facility, and the prospectors that are running around states like ours right now, aggregating land, doing a power agreement with the local electric power provider, securing community access to services that it might otherwise need, hoping to flip that and sell it to that ultimate large brand name that you'd recognize. So I share with you that distinction because I think it's important. From my experience in Oklahoma, having been in this space now for almost 20 years, that name brand that you and I know is very mindful of what it means to be a good neighbor. They are very focused on that relationship. They're very focused on local employment. They're very focused on construction jobs staying local. They're very focused on the ad valorem benefits to their schools and their other recipients. That is not always the case for somebody who's a flipper. If you have a neighborhood like I do where some people are buying homes to flip them, you know that it's sometimes the cheaper tile than the tile you would put in yourselves. That's just the nature of things. And so I want to be clear in our mind as we're thinking about what a community would expect. You should first ask, who is it that I'm dealing with? Am I dealing with the ultimate operator? These are my expectations. Or am I dealing with someone that's hoping to sell this project that I may not have a relationship 2 years from now? And then as a community negotiator, you might ratchet that up, that you expect actually the initial terms to be the ultimate terms.
Thank you. So, Second Chief Beaver, as you deal with these projects coming into your communities, you deal with the loud voices, and then you deal with the practical aspects. What are those items that you, as a tribal nation, would hope to see that takes this project from we might be able to tolerate it, or we don't want it, to, okay, this is something that has some benefits that we could actually support? What are some of those drivers for you?
The first thing is that if we're going to take this back to our people, then we have to be transparent about everything. I understand that there might be some proprietary information, maybe an NDA signed, but it will not fly if we're secretive about this. That was proven a few months ago. A data centers was proposed on our land, and so it was not. It was not transparent that enough where the people felt that should be transparent. So it was voted down by our national council. And so the first thing is that I think the number one rule is you got to be transparent about everything. How big, what's the resources, what's the strain, the benefit. There's always going to be a benefit also. And so when we talk about anybody moving into our reservation, we only have control of our lands, strict control of what we say, what goes on just in our lands, the lands that we own, those types of things. And so a lot of municipalities have done a very good job of being good partners, like Chief said earlier. It's about partnerships. And so if somebody's going to come in and build a data center on our reservation, obviously we'd like to have input, at least the conversation, and be at the table regarding this. Will we stop it? That's neither here nor there. It's about discussions and about what's going on, about our people in the area. Are their rates going to go up? Are they not going to go up? What about the drinking water in the area? What's the aquifers going to be like? So there's all sorts of things that we have interest in that we just need to sit down and talk about. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen every time. And so we can't tell our people about what's going on if we don't know. And so the very first thing that we would like to have is call us, sit at the table, just discuss it, and just so we can be good partners. But if we don't have the information, we can't give our people the information, and that's what they want.
So early engagement and transparency.
Number one, you got to be transparent about these things. You have to be.
Okay, I'm going to stick with power, and then we're going to go to water. But we talk about these projects, and we're talking about a large customer defined by the Corporation Commission was 1 to 10 megawatts, and today we hear conversations about 2 gigawatt data centers. That's 2,000 megawatts, and we're talking about PSO's system more than doubling in the next 5 years. So to Jim, are these numbers real? And what can you tell us about the electrical power needs for hyperscale scale data centers, and how is that being met today and into the future?
So a lot to unpack there.
Yes.
Great question, but a lot to unpack. So Oklahomans, we typically use around 1,100 kilowatt hours of power in our home monthly. That gives you a sense for scale. As Ken mentioned, kilowatt times 1,000 is a megawatt times a million gigawatts, right? You just start to add up these massive numbers. First question, how real is it? I'd say it's 80% predictable to be real because of the speculators that I mentioned earlier that may not sell a project. But the hyperscalers, I think, are genuine about the need to locate and to build the investment. The president has asked our country to be number one in artificial intelligence globally. That doesn't happen quickly, but it can happen strategically. But I think a lot of these loads are going to materialize over the next decade. That said, we have a collision happening in power in America because we've spent a decade or more, and this is not on any particular utility, but across the country, without investing because we had flat load. And so we have an aging infrastructure, we have grid investments that have been deferred, we have a lot of things that are coming due that we think is the data center's fault. But to my mom's point, her bill was too high 5 years ago, okay, before the data center conversation began. So in America, when we still have 60-year-old coal plants and 40-year-old gas plants and other infrastructure that's aged that we've grown comfortable with that debt schedule, we now are all using more electricity than ever on a per capita American energy density basis. I know I did. I pulled up, by the way, Chief, and I asked where the electric car charger was, and the person I asked didn't know. I drove here with an electric car. that is an example of how Americans are starting to maybe even mitigate their exposures to other forms of energy, but we are all moving towards electricity. So I wanted to kind of set the table with that issue first. The loads, I think, are real, but our utilities in a state like Oklahoma, and we have some great utilities. The PSO and OG&E typically do a pretty decent job because I measure success on reliability. How many here have had an outage that wasn't weather related? Very few, right? It happens, but it's very rare in America, thankfully. So on the whole, they're doing a pretty good job. But can they double in 10 years affordably? Is that the model we want? This is just an existential question I ask this audience to be thinking about. Because many of the data centers and hyperscalers are actually bringing creative solutions that even the president has asked them to pledge to. Concepts like bring your own generation. Like either co-locate behind the meter power next to your data center so that you're not causing pressure on my grid and raising my prices, or bilaterally contract with an energy developer across the state, pay the utility to provision that power back, and then I offset my load. It's like moving the heavy eater off the Thanksgiving table of your family, right? They go sit at the kids' table, and they had to pay for the kids' table. Right? So there are concepts happening in the law right now that questions are being asked by our legislative leaders and our corporation commissioners, probably even our congressional delegation, which is, as we've done it for 100 years, is that the next 100? Is it the next 10 to meet this massive load growth that, quite frankly, our utilities admit they've never seen? So my question, I think, for us as a state is, do we want to be more creative on how we provision power to these large appetites so that we're not exposed to those costs? I personally, as an Oklahoman, believe we should, that we should create some new market opportunities so that you can directly power data centers and they're not going across our grid, or at least not at my cost. And that is an idea that's new and that's threatening to our utilities. But the load growth is real. Should we get there the same way we've always done it? It's going to be expensive if you do.
Chief Beaver, moving to water a little bit, how does the tribe look at, obviously we're in northeastern Oklahoma, we have some of the most beautiful lakes, streams, rivers, and we're blessed being east of the 98th meridian, right. Whereas half of our state is west and doesn't enjoy the water resources that we have here in eastern Oklahoma. How are you looking at it when you deal with these hyperscalers?
Well, from my perspective, is that whenever we talk about resources, whether it's water, electric, whatever it may be, people have to realize is that we want to be the best stewards we can. I think everybody can agree on that, is that we want to be the best stewards we can about our natural resources. And so we got to take that into account on most things we do. Not everything, but most things, because this is our home. This is our reservation. We're not going to pack up and move to Houston. We're not. We're here to stay. And so we want people to be proud when they come through our reservation. We want people to recognize, when we think about the Muskogee Creek Nation, they want to think about, well, one, they got nice facilities, right? And it's a destination place, not just this place, but our whole reservation. We got all the parts of 11 counties in our reservation. And so we just can't focus on Tulsa. We just can't focus on Broken Arrow, those places. It goes from here all the way down to Holdenville, past Holdenville. And so we got to think about all those things. And so when we think about our natural resources, we got to think about, okay, how's this going to affect that? Power. I don't know if most of y'all know this, but it's almost a vicious cycle that we're in, because we have a social service for our elders. If you're 55 and older, we will give you, we help out with $750 of your electric bill twice a year. And so we will give you $750 for either electric or gas in the spring, and $750 for electric gas in the fall to help offset your bills. And so, so at a certain point, we got to think, why are these bills so high? What can we do as a tribe to reduce those bills? Do we want to feed the machine that increases those bills where we're not getting a return? You know what I'm saying? It's like that pot of money comes from somewhere. So, and a lot more people are above 55 than ever before. And so that's probably our biggest age group is 55 and older now. And so the first time in our history. So it from my perspective, all these things play into everything that we do. And so data centers, the resources, a lot of people just see dollar signs, and we got to tell people is that, hey, it's more than just about dollar signs. It's about the things that we can't replace. You know, when a stream is gone, it's pretty much going to be gone. I've never seen a stream come back before, right? Once it's gone, it's gone. And so it's those things that we have to take into account because, like I said earlier, we're not going. I have family land, meaning that it's restricted land held in trust by the United States government for the last over 100 years. It's been like that, and it will be like that forever. So it's not just me; it's my kids, my grandkids, my great grandkids. Those things I have to think about, and sometimes it's the dollar doesn't go that far.
Right. So I'm going to ask Jim. I got the sign. We need to start taking questions. I'm going to ask Jim one on power that has a couple of things to it. Number one, we talk about all this new build generation. I know personally from being involved in several projects that GRDA's power plant, they're building a gas-fired power plant, that if they would have waited a year to order that turbine and start construction, that it would almost have 40-50% higher the cost. And so ultimately, who pays for that cost of new generation? And number two, how are these hyperscalers helping mitigate the cost of new infrastructure to support these large loads?
Yeah. So can I offer an opinion?
Yes.
Okay. We need to get away from presidents picking winners and losers in energy because we're all on the whipsaw side of those reactions, in my opinion. Biden administration was all renewables. Trump administration is all thermal power. It's now a 6-year waiting list for a natural gas turbine. And to Ken's point, there's a 40% year-over-year inflation effect on those GE gas turbines. He won't even be in office by the time a utility trying to buy something to appease this administration can begin to construct or take delivery of it. And then you and I are on the receiving end of what 40 years of operating that ultimate generation is going to cost, or 60, right? So from a policy standpoint, those of you paying it are on the receiving end of policy picks that are creating market dilemmas. So I wanted to share that opinion if I could. To the point about how we get there over time, as Ken's question suggests, I think some of these hyperscalers have to bring their own power. I think they have to figure out ways legally and in coordination with the load responsible entity, or what's considered the utility in energy speak, can get that power to the load at the end user's expense. That is happening. GRDA has for more than a decade, had a supplemental supply rider. It's publicly available. You can find it on their website, where large load customers can procure power and GRDA is paid to provision it for them. So GRDA isn't having to build a new power plant. They're able to actually secure market power. That's the kind of market volatility that I think helps immediately answer the question, how do we meet that load ramp that Ken was talking about? And that is new to Oklahoma. Our utilities are apoplectic, though, when you talk about it, because, of course, they're a monopoly. You do not have a choice in Oklahoma where you get your electricity, do you? Right? And they don't want to share the market. That's their business. I get that. But you can't meet the true load ramps that we're talking about with business as usual, in my opinion. So bring your own generation, I think, has to be a part of the solution for the future for these large loads. And they have the capacity to do it. And they can actually do it cheaper. One utility with another, with another large load in the western part of the state just filed with the corporation for approval of a contract. That data center is bringing their own power below market. of what the utility could have bought it itself for. Right? So that's just a perfect example in addition to what GRDA has done. So that kind of volatility or market variability, I think, is how you smooth out the volatility.
All right, last question because we've skirted the water issue, but I think explain to this group, we know that we hear horror stories about data centers using billions of gallons or 1 billion gallons a year of surface water or groundwater or some mix thereof for evaporative cooling. What are some of the strategies that these hyperscalers have used to mitigate those risks where water may not be available or it's such a large concern that they can't? And then we'll move to the questions that have been curated by Corey.
Well, if the governor signs Senate Bill 259 that's on his desk now from the legislative session, the legislature has said that open loop or evaporative cooling is not eligible for a permit from a groundwater source. So that's going to force market reaction. But most data centers that I'm aware of in Oklahoma are already moving to either closed loop or direct to chip cooling or air cooling, which the downside of that is, of course, it creates a larger load for electricity. So most of the data centers in Oklahoma, those that are yet to be built, are actually moving away from evaporative, open source, groundwater sourced cooling, and that's a good thing.
Right. All right. So with that, the questions are coming in, and we'll try to take as many as we can. Thank you guys for being thoughtful on this. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to try to read them as they came in. So either one of you that feel you can answer this, please do. I have heard that the hyperscale data centers create a heat island that affects environment and wildlife. I've also read of noise pollution when near residents. How do these centers affect the environment?
I will try to answer that one because I have not seen a hyperscale data center. I have not been to Pryor. I know, but there is one being built not too far from me. And so it's over in Council Hill. And so if you know about Muskogee County, you know where Council Hill is. And so, or it's called Midway if if you're really from around there. But it is huge, and every time I go by, that a little bit more and a little bit more. And so, I am. I could have wrote that same question because that's my biggest concern is. And I've read about things. I've read about these data centers and the benefits and those types of things. And so I wonder about that also. But by the time we find out, is it going to be too late? So
yeah, I'm working with a city in Oklahoma right now that is working on how to develop a new ordinance around data centers to address the issues that you're talking about. Do you bespoke the location like an industrial park that you're not too worried about some of these environmental effects already? The noise abatement issue is an actual category that they're very focused on. It can't just be attained at phase one because data centers often are built out in multiple phases. It needs to be a noise abatement actually at full build out. What does that level look like? With an annual test, Ken, that's required to make sure that they're still in compliance. So you're starting to see jurisdictions, nations that are looking at codes and policies that are living ways to regulate the data center if it does come to those communities. And I think that's probably a good thing, particularly for the environmental issues.
All right, this question, I'll take this one because is there much of a concern regarding eminent domain potential of privately owned data centers? And I would say that's unequivocally no. You may have seen 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, when they were talking about a large transmission project traversing the state of Oklahoma, heading towards to provide more power to the west. And they talked about the use of eminent domain. And the Speaker of the House rallied the entire legislature. They wrote an open letter, basically said, "You will not use that here. We will, outlaw that." Essentially, and that they actually pulled and withdrew from the project. So if anybody wants to get elected, I would assume they won't support eminent domain for private data centers. So I don't think that's a huge issue. This person obviously had some technical knowledge here. There are three primary metrics used to evaluate data centers: water usage effectiveness, WUE, power usage effectiveness, PUE, and carbon usage effectiveness, CUE. Do you think these metrics are appropriate, or should they be refined to create a more clear picture of the water, energy, and carbon impacts of data centers?
I would say that's the best we have right now, and they're pretty good measures. For the bring your own generation idea I shared a moment ago, the carbon intensity is often why these data centers that have low carbon or no carbon commitments as a company don't want to rely on the brown mix that comes from local utilities. They want to actually secure directly wind or solar or even BESS technologies that are co-located. So the carbon issue is real to the market. The energy and water seems like a fair metrics to me, but I will share with you, at least those companies that I work with, none of them want to be wasteful in any regard. Not only because it comes out of their pocket, but because it makes them a bad neighbor. So those metrics are things they actually live under now. Whether there's a better model, I don't know.
All right, so this one is actually addressed to you, Jim. So, Jim, how can the OCC determine how data centers affect utilities costs when most of them need replacing and need to replace aging power generators irrespective of data centers?
Is this from my good friend Gary Allison? I see over here, Professor. Good to see you, Dean. Right. So this is a really good question that's underway right now. Much to PSO's credit, they initiated a large load tariff for their current rate case that they filed on January 2nd. That's before the Oklahoma Corporation Commission now. Chairman of Energy in the House, Chairman Bowles, who's also a candidate for the Corporation Commission, passed the Ratepayer Protection Act this year, along with obviously the help of a number of legislators, that makes it state law that the Corporation Commission, or even co-ops, if that's where a data center is located, have to create a separate tariff class for data centers or large load customers, meaning people over 75 megawatts and above within a certain industry, that they have their own ring-fenced cost analysis, such that you in the residential ratepayer class, such that you in the commercial class, like a casino or a restaurant, or even industrial, like large manufacturing, that's not otherwise data center or artificial intelligence or cryptocurrency as the statute defines it, have to actually have their own cost of service study done annually by the utility to confirm that those costs are being borne by the people in that class by definition. PSO got ahead of it, but that case goes to trial at the end of June. OG&E is under a similar OCC order to file something by July 1, and this statute takes effect July 1st. So in this year, Oklahoma will develop those policies, at least at the Corporation Commission, and then municipal power authorities and co-ops are going to have to do something themselves to conform that to state law. So that's the good news for all of you, that is going to be knowable very soon to follow state law. Why I think that's also important is because those large loads that are going to have their own sandbox probably want more choice in the costs that are getting pushed at them. That's where I can predict some tension for you, because the utility can't push things at them that aren't theirs to begin with. Now, here's the good news. For that under-invested grid that I shared with you, that is just my general comment about Oklahoma in general, these large data centers are going to be paying for grid updates and upgrades that you and I all will benefit from. Those costs have to be borne by them directly, but that new high voltage line that is the backbone of our cobweb that we share in general is going to be updated at their cost and not yours.
Great. So here's a question that I'll take, and then the second part I'll give to the second chief Beaver, is how about the question of permitting for the data centers, air emission permitting, wastewater discharges, stormwater permits, and construction permits. And, so now you've got a web of multiple parties from the state to localities on some of the construction permitting. But I will say that one thing that's underspoken of is air permitting for the power necessary to support the growth of these data centers. And Oklahoma is in a unique position. We've been in attainment for all of the Clean Air Act pollutants that are criteria pollutants, the 6. But we're in a unique spot because both Oklahoma City and Tulsa metropolitan areas have exceeded those attainment in ground level ozone. And ozone is, a combination of NOx and some soot and some other things, volatile organic compounds that bake in the sun and create this irritant that drives asthma, things like that. And we're in a unique spot because we're not in non-attainment, double negative there. And so there are no rules to deal with the fact that your new facility, the modeling may say it's going to exceed the ozone permitting requirements, which means you're going to have to downsize your generation request. And so I think those issues have yet to be meted out because a lot of these projects are theoretical. They've got land agreements that, letters of understanding, memos of understanding that support these interconnect requests. That when you get down to brass tacks and they want to build a 2 gigawatt data center in certain parts of the state, that's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to do that. So I think the water discharge issue, if you go to a closed loop system or an air-cooled system, those permits would then be on the power generation side and not the data. But going to the second part of that question, are there any environmental justice concerns with data centers in rural areas? And I'd give that to Second Chief Beaver.
I would say absolutely there's environmental justice concerns. I know that the data center that's going up right now, when I go by there, it's literally, there's a church about a third of a mile from there. I'm also a minister. I preached at that church a handful of times. And so when I go there, I can see almost from the church what the silt fences that they had put up. I go down a little bit farther, there's a house right there, right in the middle of that construction area. And so I'm like, what did they offer this person there, or they're still living there? And so when you talk about environmental justice, who's the voice for those people? It's us. It's the elected officials. It's the government that should be the voice for those people. And so when you talk about environmental justice, sometimes there is no justice.
So for people in the audience, you all are here at a sustainability conference, so you probably understand, but the idea of environmental justice is that the burdens of industry are disproportionately borne by those communities that are next to these facilities. And typically, because those in an upper economic echelon can move away from those facilities, it tends to be the lowest and most vulnerable. And so just for you, that's how the government looks at environmental justice. So we've got some repeat questions, but two of them I'm going to take together. And one of them is how much data center capacity do we need versus how much is being built versus how much do we really need? And are these things going to be obsolete in 5 years? Are we going to overbuild and be the Athens, Greece that built all the infrastructure for the Olympics, and now it's all overgrown with weeds? So is it that situation, or are economics going to be at play to mitigate that? Or is data ever evolving and we just don't know?
We probably don't know, but to the SPPQ list that you described earlier, I'd say, again, about 80% probably gets built. Some of it is speculation. But I do not see this country or the global economy moving away from digitization. I do not see it moving away from greater electrification. So whether there's a gap at some point in time, perhaps, but I think what I'm seeing in Oklahoma, at least, is highly predictable investment that's coming.
Okay, this one, Oklahoma groundwater law literally says that overlying landowners can pump our aquifers dry in 20 years. How can we keep data centers from using groundwater? Question mark.
Well, as I was sharing about Senate Bill 259, it would outlaw a permit holder from seeking groundwater access if it's for a data center.
I like to think of Oklahoma as pretty libertarian and do with what you want on land. Where is the tension around, private land use, private landowners' rights versus this greater NIMBY noise, natural resource argument? Where do you guys see that going?
Chief, do you want to take?
I'm on that side of the fence. Probably, if you ask me if I got to get off the fence, it's that nobody's going to tell me what to do on my land. And so, but I also don't want to see a data center on my neighbor's land either. But so where's the happy medium, like you said earlier, And so, I just want, and I think that's why discussions like this are so important. Is that yes, private landowners, we've had those issues. They're putting all these things on there that affects my property, the value of my property, and so how do we stop that? Usually it's through legislation, and then the state come to effect or the county doing something, and so it's those partnerships and those things that are so important, like today. But also, I sure don't want somebody telling me what to do on my land.
I was secretary during the large electrification of vehicles push and supported, the installation of many chargers using the VW settlements and things like that. But I used to make the point is, what do you think Oklahomans will do when the federal government tells them what kind of car that they should drive and they outlaw internal combustion engines? Well, they're going to get a 12-cylinder Hemi, redo it, and put the loudest pipes on it just so the government knows they're there. And so, I always find that interesting how the tension of that would work. We're running to the end of time and running out of questions, so this is perfect. Are there, and this one I think would go to Chief Beaver here, are there health risks from large-scale data centers specifically for children, and are there development risks, and who is studying these concerns, if you know?
I just told this the other day, is it's okay to say I don't know, because I don't know. I don't think there's a long-term study on those yet.
I can tell you, there are agencies in the federal government, ASCO and US EPA and DOE. All of these have groups that study it, HHS, but I couldn't tell you what those risks are. Have you, obviously you've heard those concerns in representing hyperscale data center developers, but what have you seen? How's the reaction? What do you know about that, if anything? And it's okay to say I don't know either.
Yeah, I don't know of any direct nexus that's provable. I know there's a concern, a lot of internet chatter about it, but nothing that I've been able to read that I would consider to be a peer-reviewed conclusion that's believable.
Corey, I think that's the end of our questions. But let me tell you, I think we're all available to ask questions, and we really want you to be able to find resources and make your own decisions. And so we thank you for the opportunity to visit. Thank you to the Muskogee Creek Nation for use of this beautiful facility. Thank you to Second Chief Beaver for your time and insights, and thank you to Jim Roth for your time and insights as well. Join with me in giving them a hand.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay. Let's give them all a round of applause and time into it. And I know we didn't get to every question. There were so many good questions that really covered a whole span of air, water, environmental impact. And so I thank Ken Wagner for facilitating all those questions and keeping the conversation going. And again, to Jim Roth and to Second Chief Beaver for taking on some of these hard questions. And we didn't get them all, And as he mentioned, they'll stick around to answer a few more questions. And if this is something that you want to hear more on, if there's an expanded component of this conversation, let us know. We have time to pull together another conversation around this if we need to. Again, I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to thank my board members that are here today: Richard Cox, Rick Karski, Allison McLeod, Ann Money, Tracy Phillips, Dustin Reed, and Christy Lawson, and Ian Open. If you'll give them a round of applause for being here today. And I also want to thank my team, Jill, Maud, who welcomed you here today, Morgan Fairley running our AV, along with Missy Lukenbach and volunteer Bethany Jones. Couldn't do it without them, of course, so let's give them a round of applause, please. I somebody recently told me we do a lot of applauding. I think he's in the room. And we do. We've got to celebrate each other, so we might have one more applaud to go for. But I do want to say, if you're interested and you want to get more involved, we do have a suite of programs, tools that include Scorecard, First Thursdays, Terrace Score, Green Drinks, First Steps, and of course B2B Case for Sustainability Series. All kinds of ways to get involved, get engaged. Wherever you are on your journey of sustainability, we're here for it. We meet people where they are, and we help you along that. So if you're interested, become a member, support the work we do, and get involved. So again, thank you to Principal Chief Hill and his team with Muskogee Creek Nation for sponsoring it today, and a special thank you again to James Williams and to Christy Lawson for your support for today's event. Thank you for joining, and stick around and visit a little further. Have a good rest of the day.